Hello everyone. Some stories don't begin with a smile, they begin with a challenge. Alex and LYTUNA fell in love in a world where prejudice still speaks louder than feelings. When Alex's father stood between them, it wasn't just a line dividing two people, it was a gap between two worlds. Will their love fade away in tears, or grow stronger through the pain itself? The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the room, weaving softly through the pale morning light. LYTUNA stood in front of the mirror, watching her reflect. That day carried a different weight. It was the first meeting with Alex's father, the man everyone spoke of with a mix of respect and hesitation. Outside, the sound of an engine hummed quietly. Alex waited by the door, his smile calm, though his eyes couldn't fully hide a trace of unease. LYTUNA stepped out, carrying with her the silence of someone who knows she's walking toward something uncertain. The mansion appeared behind the trees, towering like a statement of power. Every detail, from the polished marble columns to the perfectly trimmed gardens, breathed order and control. Even the leaves seemed to sit in place by the will of their owner, the same way he shaped everything around him. When LYTUNA crossed the threshold, Richard's first glance made her breath catch. His eyes weren't cold, exactly just the kind of eyes that had long learned to measure people instead of feeling them. Dinner passed quietly. The sound of silverware against porcelain filled the space between a few polite probing questions. LYTUNA kept her voice steady, choosing every word carefully. The candlelight reflected off her face, highlighting a calm grace that needed no jewelry to shine. Across the table, Richard stayed silent. He watched not as a father would, but as a man weighing the worth of something about to enter his son's life. Alex sat between them, his eyes filled with both pride and hope. But that night, as the lights dimmed, both he and LYTUNA knew this dinner was only the beginning of a much longer test, one where sincerity would have to stand against principles built over an entire lifetime. When the last plates were cleared from the table, the air in the room grew heavy. The clinking of silverware stopped, leaving only the faint scent of wine and the flicker of candlelight across the long table. Richard looked up, his voice low, steady, and deliberate, as if every word had been decided long before it was spoken. The silence that followed didn't need to be explained. Alex stood, while LYTUNA lowered her head slightly. Everything she wanted to say suddenly felt meaningless in that room, filled with invisible rules. She picked up her bag, whispered a soft "thank you," and left. The door closed behind her, shutting her off from a world built of cold walls and eyes that never opened their hearts. Outside, it had started to rain. Small drops hit the polished stone path, scattering the reflections of car lights. LYTUNA walked away, carrying nothing but the echo of one sentence repeating in her mind: "She will never be my daughter-in-law." The small apartment greeted her with silence. The weak yellow light cast over familiar things: the old coffee cup, the worn sofa, the vase of dried flowers. Everything felt painfully peaceful, as if the room itself had forgotten what hope once looked like. Across the city, Alex sat in his car, letting the rain soak his shoulders. He no longer knew where he was driving, only that he needed to get away from the house where his father still sat, motionless glass, in hand, eyes cold as glass. Two men sharing the same name, Richard, yet between them lay a distance that could never be crossed. That night, LYTUNA heard a knock at the door. Outside stood a figure trembling in the rain, eyes filled with everything left unsaid. She didn't open the door fully, just enough for them to see each other through the narrow gap where love and reason met for the last time. No refusal was needed. Her silence said everything. When he turned away, his shadow blurred in the rain, leaving a chill that seeped into the room. From that day on, LYTUNA stopped going out. Alex's messages remained unread. Days passed. The scent of coffee faded. The flowers on the table wilted, as if the room itself understood that some wounds can't be healed by tears. She knew her pain wasn't from Richard's rejection, but from the look in Alex's eyes when he had to choose between love and family. It was a look that said, enough sometimes. Love doesn't die from a lack of courage. It dies when it's caught between two worlds that were never meant to belong together. In the days that followed, Alex didn't give up. Every morning, he stood at the corner near LYTUNA's office just to catch a glimpse of her, walking quickly, quietly, as if there was an invisible sky separating them. Each time their eyes met, she looked down and hurried away, leaving him standing there in the wind that carried the faint scent of coffee and a fading hope that disappeared with the afternoon light. One gray afternoon, Alex was called to his father's office. The room was large, filled with the stale mix of cigarette smoke and silence. Richard stood by the window, staring out at the rain-covered city. His words weren't directed at his son. They simply felt cold and deliberate, like ashes dropping into a glass of wine. Alex didn't respond. He just looked at his father, and in his eyes, what was once respect had turned into distance. When he finally left, the light still cast over Richard's aging face, the face of a man who had long believed that reason was the strongest wall to hide behind his fears. That night, when the house fell silent, Richard opened an old wooden box from his desk. Inside was a letter, its paper yellowed with time, written in soft, slanted handwriting by someone who once made his heart stray from the path of ambition. Memories long buried came rushing back, and with them came the realization the loss he once suffered was repeating itself this time, reflected in his son's eyes. The next morning, he went to the building where LYTUNA worked. He was no longer the man bound by iron rules. Standing there in his neatly pressed suit, his eyes had changed, tired, warm, and unexpectedly human. In the middle of the crowded street, she froze. And in that single glance, everything he might have said later became unnecessary. He turned to leave, and in his absence, she felt a quiet stillness settle inside her, one that melted the coldness of the past and made room for forgiveness. That afternoon, the rain returned, the same rain that once separated them, now softly stitching two hearts back together. LYTUNA walked to the park, where old memories waited. Through the hazy curtain of rain, she saw him, the familiar figure drenched, still standing in the same spot as if he had never left. She walked toward him. Neither of them spoke. Only an embrace, tight and trembling, held them together in the rain, where all the hurt slowly dissolved in warmth. No apologies, no promises. They both understood true love isn't something to be protected. It's what gives you the courage to stop running away. A car pulled over by the curb. Richard stepped out, an umbrella in his hand. He walked toward them and lifted it, shielding both under its cover. His eyes softened, no longer cold with authority, but calm, with the tenderness of a father finally learning to let go. The three of them stood there in the rain, No one said a word, but in that silence, every distance disappeared. The gray sky began to brighten. As the rain eased, Tuna looked up, her eyes shining with a new kind of faith that even hearts once frozen can melt again when touched by true love. That rain seemed to wash away everything that once brought storms between them. As the silver curtain faded, the sky left behind a soft light like a quiet act of forgiveness. 3 hearts that had been broken finally found their way back to peace. A few weeks later, the garden of their home welcomed the morning with the scent of warm tea and gentle sunlight. Birds sang softly among the leaves, and the light filtered through wooden windows, settling on the tea table where the 3 of them sat. No more heavy silence, no more distance, only the slow, steady breath of people who had learned to understand one another. Richard poured more tea, his eyes glinting under the morning light. His voice was low, but the sharp edge it once carried was gone, replaced by a quiet warmth, the kind that comes from regret finally released. He looked at Tuna for a long moment before smiling, the smile of a father no longer judging, only grateful. Tuna bowed her head slightly, her fingers brushing the rim of her cup as an emotion she couldn't name rose inside her. She didn't need to speak. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't live in words, but in eyes that have softened over time. Alex sat beside them, watching quietly. In that moment, he realized happiness isn't loud. It's simply being with the people you love without fear, without having to choose. A soft breeze passed through, rippling the surface of the tea light shimmering on the drops still clinging to the leaves. Richard looked up at the sky, his eyes carrying a calm he hadn't felt in years. Tuna looked up too. In the soft sunlight, she thought some battles in life aren't meant to be won, only lived through. Because love, when patient enough, will always find a way to bloom, whether in the rain or among the ashes. Amid the gentle scent of tea and the sound of quiet laughter in the garden, the past slowly dissolved like morning mist. A new chapter began, one where love no longer needed permission to exist, but was free to live simply and sincerely in the light of a peaceful morning.
Khó khăn, cô ngồi xuống, một lá chuối